Cab driver rips me to shreds, thinking I can't understand him but I can, by user Bijalunder Couch. Obligatory. This happened several years ago, a few months after I had moved to Chicago. I had moved there from Romania, where I'd been living and going to school. Love Romania, people are great, drop what you're doing and visit. Anyway, while I was there, due to my living situation, I had to learn the language fast and thoroughly. Not many people around me spoke English, outside of the uni I was at. So fast forward to the few months after I arrived in Chicago. Imagine my surprise when the driver of the Uber I had ordered appeared to have a Romanian name. The area had a lot of Eastern Europeans, so I guess it shouldn't have been so surprising. I was really excited to talk to him and make sure I wasn't getting rusty, maybe make a friend. Up pulls the guy, I get in, he greets me but he appears to be on the phone with a buddy/family member, so I just sit quietly in the back, listening in a bit. The person on the other end asks if the driver is getting off work soon. He responded with something like the following. No, I still have a few hours left, then I'll go home. Right now I have someone in the car. God, I hate this country, the women here are so fat and ugly. At least this one has a nice chest, but why can't she lose some weight? And he goes on and on about all the problems with me and other American women. Now I've always been a bit on the chunky side and you best believe the Romanians love to comment on it, so I was used to it. But I was a bit shocked that this guy was going off like that. Anyway, I'm just kinda sitting bemused in the back seat as we near my destination. Then I tell him, in Romanian, with all my might trying to pull off the distinct accent of the region I had been living in, can you just pull over there, on the right? I swear this guy's head did the Exorcist girl head move and he turned a shade of red I have seen nowhere else in nature. He didn't say anything, just pulled over. When I got out I said thanks and added, you're not attractive and you're also fat, so maybe you shouldn't make comments like that. I have never again reached such levels of self-pride. EDA, wow, this blew up a bit. Thanks so much for the awards. Yay, Gitsa on the Uber app, if you see this, hope you're still fat and ugly, si futa ti sipamtai. Roommate kept using my makeup without asking, so I made sure she'd never do it again, by user whole kitchen 3328. I shared an apartment with a girl who had no concept of boundaries. She constantly borrowed my stuff without asking, clothes, shoes, and worst of all, my makeup. I told her countless times to stop, but she always brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. The last straw came when I found out she had used my expensive foundation for a party and didn't even bother cleaning the bottle. That's when I decided it was time to teach her a lesson. I went out and bought a cheap, old foundation from the dollar store and swapped it with mine, adding a bit of self-tanner to the mix. I left it in plain sight on my vanity and waited. Sure enough, the next weekend, she waltzed out of the bathroom with an orange face. I didn't say a word as she headed off to her party. The next day, she came home furious, complaining that people had been laughing at her all night. I just smiled and said, oh no, maybe it wasn't your shade. She didn't touch my stuff again after that. If I get bad service, I play the world's worst song on the jukebox and leave, by user Daganta Kong. I go to sports bars quite often to watch games and eat basic bar food. At most of the bars I go to, they have a machine on the wall where you can spend $1 to purchase a song from Apple Music and play it across the entire facility. On the Apple Music store, there's a song called Tubular Bells Part 2. It's possibly the most rage-inducing song I've ever heard, if you would even call it a song. I have no clue how it ended up on Apple Music, but I definitely use this fact to my advantage. It's basically just some dude jamming on random instruments. It's not terrible, but the song has no real rhythm it's trying to get into and no specific beat it's trying to build off. It's like the beginning of a Pink Floyd song that just constantly builds up, and the second you think he, or she, is gonna get into rhythm or start jamming out, they either change instruments entirely, or restart and continue playing different chords. It quite literally will drive you nuts if you are forced to listen to it. And the best part is it's 26 minutes long. I've been at a few bars where there was no way for the bartender or waiter to cancel the song out without flipping the break or powering the sound system to reboot it. I've stuck around a few times to see everyone suffer. But the last few times I've done it, I've immediately left as to not blow my cover. Last month I went to a pretty large chain sports bar that I won't name and got absolutely terrible service. Food was bad, server came to refill our beers once in over an hour and we had to go to the bar a few times to top off. And to make the matter worse, we got kicked out of our table after an hour and a half cause apparently our table was reserved for a specific time for a ball game that came on soon. No big deal though, I get it, so we just moved to the bar. I was a bit frustrated as I've been to this place many times before and we usually get much better service. I wasn't mad or anything, but I was annoyed enough where I decided I was gonna make everyone's ears bleed for a little while before they shut the music system down to play the ball game on the sound system across the restaurant. Seeing the visible confusion and frustration across everyone's face across the entire bar is a good way to make an okay night great. To those of you who frequent bars and restaurants with the music box on the wall, you're welcome. Guzzle my tea, pay the price, by user Labradogs90. My dad was an abusive but in addition to his physical and emotional abuse, he did things just to piss people off. So we grew up on homemade iced tea. We, my siblings and I, made the tea because my dad didn't. He barely held a job because he had a problem with authority. My dad would wait until we would fix a glass of iced tea, mix it with sugar, lemon, and ice, and sit down with it. Then he'd walk up and drink the entire thing. Just guzzle the whole thing. Then he would complain about it. He'd say, too much lemon, not enough, or my favorite, too sweet. My dad was obese. Nothing was too sweet for him. Besides, why would he drink all of it, if he didn't like it? Why couldn't he ask us to make him one? Sometimes we'd ask if he wanted a glass and he'd say no but drink ours anyway. He was just a dick. So, one day, I knew what he was going to do. So, I used salt. My brother was watching me and looked at me like WTF. I just put my finger over my lips. The tea was still a little warm, so it was easier. The tea was more soluble. I mixed in that salt and then added ice. I sat down with a sandwich like I was going to have lunch. Sure enough, my dad walked over and picked up my tea and started guzzling. He then ran to the sink and spit it out and coughed. He was yelling. I said, "What's wrong? Is it too sweet?" I worked so hard not to burst out laughing. My brother was in the corner with his head down and shaking with laughter. My father glared at me. He never drank my tea again. Some bullies just need a grandma hug, by Uzarumbunban. I have a grandson, I'll call him Sam, 14. We've been pretty close through the years. Since he was just a few months old, my husband and I have kept him overnight, taken him on weekend trips, watched him for several days at a time while his parents vacationed, etc. Even when we had to move a few hours away, he'd come visit for 2 or 3 nights a few times a year. His parents divorced, and as he became an adolescent, he became withdrawn and distant. But I found that he seemed to love to hear stories of the hilarious things he'd said and done when he was little. He would sit and listen and be engaged with me for at least a while. I've tried hard to keep a connection without being pushy. He's been playing sports for years and we make it to at least a game or 2 per sport each season to see him play. He'd come give he a hug after each game. My stepdaughter, his mom, told me she was amazed that he would hug me in public. I was the only person he'd hug at his games, including her. I was pretty proud of this. But it almost came to an end after one game last summer. My husband and I showed up and Sam was very happy to see us. After the game he ran out, and as he gave me a hug, I heard a nearby voice, "Look everyone! Isn't that sweet, Sam's hugging his grandma." I felt Sam tense up and he immediately ended the hug. I was not going to let that little turd ruin those special hugs, so I turned to the kid who taunted Sam, grabbed him in a bear hug, and exclaimed, "Oh, are you jealous? You must need a grandma hug, too." The kid just stood there stunned for a couple seconds, long enough for a couple of Sam's friends to start in, "Jake, get your own grandma. Dude, you're creepy." He turned beet red and ran off. We heard through my stepdaughter that Jake was kind of a jerk who always found reasons to pick on his teammates, and Sam and his friends thought what I did to him was hilarious. So far, Sam still gives me hugs. Grandma hug for the win.